On February 1st, as you all know, the oral arguments for the lawsuit against the FCC for their repeal of net neutrality began, and this was a hearing that was, I believe, longer than 5 hours. It was incredibly long, and a lot of the discussion centered on whether or not broadband can and should be characterized as telecommunications. Now, for more on this case, we go to John Brodkin of Ars Technica, who reports a Federal Communications Commission lawyer faced a skeptical panel of judges today as the FCC defended its repeal of net neutrality rules and deregulation of the broadband industry. FCC General Counsel Thomas Johnson struggled to explain why broadband shouldn't be considered a telecommunications service and struggled to explain the FCC's failure to protect public safety agencies from internet providers blocking or slowing down content. Of the three judges, Circuit Judge Patricia Millett expressed the most skepticism of Johnson's arguments, repeatedly challenging the FCC's definition of broadband and its disregard for arguments made by public safety agencies. She also questioned the FCC's claim that net neutrality rules harmed broadband investment. Circuit Judge Robert Wilkins also expressed some skepticism of FCC arguments, while Senior Circuit Judge Stephen Williams seemed more amenable to FCC arguments. In other words, it's going about as we expected. Williams, if you'll recall, is the individual who actually wrote a dissenting opinion back in 2016 when a court he was on voted to uphold Obama-era FCC regulations. Net neutrality regulations specifically. So we know that this individual is against net neutrality, but Millett, we kind of expected her to be an ally because she is a fairly liberal judge. She's been kind of positioning herself as the next Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is great. And in this case, it's very clear that she's not buying their pro-corporate argument, which is fantastic. Now, I love that she's not buying their argument that, oh, well, you know, if we have net neutrality, that's going to hurt investment, because we're finding out that the opposite is actually true. Once the FCC codified their Title II net neutrality protections into law, well, investment increased. But now, ever since the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality, investment decreased. Not even kidding about that. Now, does that mean that investment in general has anything to do with net neutrality? No, it doesn't. They're not correlated, and that's the point. But these internet service providers had already planned to decrease investment, so the fact that Ajit Pai used that argument, perhaps being ignorant about their intentions to decrease investment the following year after he repealed net neutrality, not a good look for him. But getting into the specifics here, in order to deregulate broadband, the FCC argued that broadband itself isn't a telecommunications service and is instead an information service. Johnson said that broadband is an information service because internet providers offer DNS, domain name system services, and caching as part of the broadband package. DNS and caching are determinative here because they allow broadband users to perform all the functions listed in the definition of an information service, e.g. acquiring, storing, and processing information, he argued. But the DNS/caching argument didn't seem to satisfy Millett. She repeatedly asked Johnson why the FCC still considered telephone service to be telecommunications, despite ruling that broadband isn't. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding how the FCC's description of broadband wouldn't also apply to telephone service, she said. Like broadband, telephone service is constantly used to acquire and share information, Millett said. She used the filling of medical prescriptions as an example. Someone can call a pharmacy over the phone and use their voice or push a series of buttons to get a prescription filled, just as they can get a prescription filled by going to a doctor's website, she said. It seems to be the exact same functionality, but one is voice and one is typing, she said. So based on everything that I've read thus far, it seems as if Millett is not buying the FCC's argument one bit, and I'm really hoping that she'll be an influential force on the court and convince the other judges to not go along with the FCC here and actually rule against them, because it's very clear that they don't have the right argument on their side. Everything that they said they needed to repeal net neutrality for, such as broadband investment, well, it shows that that's not actually the case. If you say that net neutrality hurts broadband investment, but investment actually decreases once you repeal supposedly harmful regulations, that's not helping your argument. And when it comes to telecommunications, really what they're trying to argue, the FCC anyways, is trying to argue based on semantics. But what Millet is saying is that doesn't really make sense. Your argument doesn't make sense. Your reasoning for repealing net neutrality is not sufficient. Now, another thing that is coming back to bite the FCC in the ass is, well, when you impose these sweeping regulatory changes, you're supposed to consider the impact on the public and public safety. But when we found out that Verizon was throttling the internet of Santa Clara County firefighters in California as they were fighting firefighters, that is now coming back to bite them in the ass, because that was brought up in court as well. Quote, Millett grilled Johnson on the public safety topic. Post hoc remedies don't work in the public safety context, and unless I missed it, that was not addressed anywhere in the repeal order, Millett said. Johnson responded that the burden ought to be on them, the public safety agencies, to show concrete evidence of harm. Millett cut in, saying, why is the burden on them? The statute repeats again and again that public safety is an important goal. You had comments from the public expressing concerns. A lot of them. It seems like you have a statutory obligation. You had a lot of comments, a serious issue that should have been addressed by the commission in the order. That's not a burden on them. And this is glorious to hear her grill them for that, because why would it be incumbent on the public safety agencies, for example, the fire department, to bring up this issue? Oh, well, we can't have you throttle our internet because that could be harmful to our efforts to fight fires. Why would that be on them? You're the government agency that's supposed to take the time to listen to feedback before imposing all of these sweeping deregulatory changes. But you chose not to do that. So why would that be on them? And it's clear that their argument isn't landing. And I love that it's not landing, because hearing the justification for the FCC's repeal of net neutrality is mind-numbingly fucking dumb. It's so stupid, I don't know how anyone can buy it. So the fact that they even have a chance of winning in court is absurd to me, but nonetheless, in spite of what Millett is saying, she's just one judge, so I don't want you to get too overconfident here, because it may very well be the case that the other two judges rule against everyone and rule in favor of the FCC. So this is just the very first day of oral arguments here that we're going over, and I'm expecting this to be a very long and lengthy legal battle. So we will see how this turns out. Thus far, it seems as if the FCC isn't having an easy time convincing the judges, at least one judge, that they were justified in repealing net neutrality. So if they can find anything to strike down this repeal, any one thing, then that will be fantastic for us. And it seems as if they have more than enough reasons to strike down this repeal. So I hope the FCC loses, but again, it's only the beginning. I will keep you updated on this lawsuit as it goes forward. It's certainly going to be interesting, and I'll be glued to this case, looking for any and all details when it comes up, and I'll be sure to tell you guys about it.
Girly Mike Fettuccine needs your support on Patreon. What a loser. Visit patreon.com/Humanist Report to support the low ratings Humanist Report. Sad. My views are much higher.